How does Elon Musk do so much with the same 24 hours as the rest of us?
Where gas expands the size of the container. So if you give people a quarter, it'll take a quarter. Tell them a week, it'll take a week. So you want to constantly compress the container size.
You know, just in light of recent events, I saw Elon yesterday. I think in 1 week, he's got like the robo taxi, he's got the Starship test flight, he's got Optimus robot, all these launches, campaigning for president. He's at the next Trump rally. You know, this guy obviously seems to do superhuman things in parallel that most people could never even imagine doing with the same 24 hours as the rest of us. I'm really curious on your thesis. How does Elon Musk do so much with the same 24 hours as the rest of us?
What'd you do this week?
Yeah, what'd you do this week? I'm like, shit, I didn't do shit.
Exactly. Well, I mean, honestly, that's very insightful, which is
Yeah.
if you approach every day and every week of your life with what you accomplished this week, I think that compounds, and very few people do that. So I think that's the number one ingredient. Second thing is I think he's founder mode on steroid. I should have pointed this out, that he's built all of his companies in founder mode. So, you know, when he was taking over X, I kind of tweeted out this example I knew from SpaceX. Some friends of mine had been interns at SpaceX, and I sort of warned the Twitter politically correct crowd that worked there that they were in for a rude awakening. And, you know, I gave this example of he once caught some interns in line waiting for a coffee at SpaceX. There was a line of interns, you know, piling up around their coffee machine at SpaceX. And he sent a memo to the company about it saying, like, wait, why are all the interns wasting all this time? If you feel like you have nothing better to do than waiting in line, you know, you're at the wrong company. And by the way, I'm installing cameras to make sure that we don't have lines at the coffee shop. And so, you know, people went crazy on Twitter at the time because they're like, oh my God, that's so evil. You know, how could you do that? Put aside whether, you know, companies should even have coffee, like the luxury, just taken for granted that you're entitled to a coffee machine, you know, coffee line, espresso machine at work. But I think basically just having that mentality towards every bit of entitlement, stamping out entitlement, and expecting people to accomplish things every day does compound over decades in his career.
What are you accomplishing this week? I like that. It's a good frame because you're like, there's got to be a sense of urgency,
Yep.
right? Most people just look at their life on a year, but they might be sprinting for 3 to 4 months of that year instead of putting it more into, hey, what did you do this week? Let's try to get a month's worth of stuff done this week.
There's a principle, you know, I think of it as Max Levchin taught me. It's like chemistry, like startups are like chemistry, engineering is like chemistry. Gas expands the size of the container. So if you give people a quarter, it'll take a quarter. If you tell people they have a month, it'll take a month. If you tell people it takes 2 weeks, it'll take 2 weeks. Tell them a week, it'll take a week. So you want to constantly compress the container size because those accomplishments, those building blocks add up over months, quarters, years, and now decades.
What about you personally? Because I was talking to your chief of staff too, and he's like, you know what? Keith just has a guy for everything. like anything he doesn't want to do, like every area of his life is systematized. There's a guy for this, that. Like it seems like you've kind of really tapped into the concept of leverage in a big way. Like what are your big time hacks that have allowed you to do so much?
Well, the most important thing is actually a lesson I learned from Peter Thiel, which is people systematically undervalue their time. Like everybody has, as you point out, 24 hours in a day, and the more things you want to accomplish and the more things you want to accomplish in parallel, the more you have to really be attuned to the value of time. So I basically try to focus my time on things that are super important to me and or to my goals and try to remove everything else and get leverage out of that. Now, it's never perfect. Like I wish I could send someone to the doctor for me, you know, a dentist particularly, if I could send, you know, someone, a clone to the dentist. So you're never going to get 100%. But if you think about your calendar in a week, what fraction of that time is allocated to high leverage activities and what fraction's drag coefficient? So if I can get it in the 80% is, you know, really effective, that's amazing. So I do tend to find ways to take the things either I'm not good at, not proficient at, or they're just not strategic and try to delegate them. Basically trade money for time if you can.
Do you audit your calendar?
I do all the time. Fortunately, my chief of staff who you talked with works with my EA and they give me a report every quarter, decomposed pretty precisely. So let's say X% were new pitches with new founders, Y% were board meetings, Z% was like one-on-one meetings with founders, X was KV internal meetings, et cetera, et cetera. And then I look at the numbers, they compare it to prior quarters, and I do try to dial up or down if I see things that don't feel that strategic to me. So for example, I teach this to CEOs all the time. I'll give away the secret, but basically every time I meet with a new CEO, I say, and they're somewhat frustrated by their time allocation and they're trying to get more out of their day or week or company, I basically ask them to go to a whiteboard, write out their 3 top priorities. and they, you know, write them out. And most CEOs are pretty proficient at identifying the top 3 priorities. Usually one's recruiting. After they finish the exercise, I'm like, okay, now open your Google Calendar, and it's always a Google Calendar. And then let's see what fraction of time last week or last month actually maps to those priorities. And it's never 100%. There's often some discrepancies. And that actually shows the mismatch of time against the priorities is where you get more success in matching them.
Yeah, I need to.
But a chief of staff is Jack's really good, so
Jack
definitely helps a lot.
So okay, yeah. So those calendar audits are key, and just making sure that your priorities line up. You're looking at short-term goals, like, hey, what are we doing this week? Are our 3 most important activities the majority of our work here?
Yep.
And then figuring out how to ruthlessly delegate everything else.
Like let's give it an illustration. So the classic example is almost every CEO says recruiting talent is my number 1 priority.
Yeah.
I have almost never in 23 years found a CEO whose number 1 allocation of actual time is against recruiting.
Yes.
So by definition, they're either lying to themselves or not as effective as they could be.
So then you just kind of rework your calendar to reflect, hey, I anticipate
As close as possible. It's never going to be 100%.
Yeah.
Like there are things that you just kind of have to do, per my dentist example, and there's the business version of that, but you want to maximize the ratio.
The business dentist, yes. You try to eliminate all the admin out of your life.
Yeah, exactly.